Everyone, and welcome back to the Rise Factor. Today, I have a very special guest, someone that I have known for quite some years now, and I've also had the pleasure of working with. Well, she helped me in a lot of many ways years ago. So, Christy Roberts, welcome firstly to the Rise Factor. It's such an honor to have you on today.
Oh, thanks so much. It's exciting to be here.
Christy, for those that don't know you, you are a leadership and life coach. You're a facilitator. You are the founder of Creating Change Network. You have 30 years experience of facilitation and leadership development. And you work with leaders and organizations and people on the human side of connection, which I love. And you help people understand the cultural, generational, and behavioral differences that shape how we connect, influence, and lead, which is so fitting for our podcast, which is Conversations for Growth. So, Christy, with all of that years of experience, all of the wealth of knowledge that you have, to kick it off, for those listening, can you give a snapshot of what inclusive conversations really mean with the context of building relationships?
Yeah, when we talk about inclusive conversations, we live in a very multicultural society here in Australia. We also work in the workplace. We have many generations, but we also have different personality styles and habits and traits. And so in the context of building relationships, understanding different cultural styles, understanding, direct versus indirect, understanding how generations communicate differently, like it's an absolute game changer when your business, your work, your relationships, everything relies on how we communicate. And it is an essential skill for everyone, whether you're a leader or not. And so building stronger relationships will get you better results in life, flat out.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
completely agree. I actually saw Christy recently. Someone asked, like, what are the non-negotiables, or what are the things that we should know or should be taught in property management, that perhaps isn't. And I think going back to, you just did a quick snapshot of what it means is when we're dealing with people every single day, it's almost like we need to have a psychology degree to understand how people's brains works, the human behaviors, the cognitive biases, to really understand and be able to relate and communicate with people. So do you think it should be something necessary that when we are in a service-based industry, that we have that context around, well, how do we actually communicate to somebody else that isn't us, that doesn't behave the same way as us?
Exactly. And I love the way that you summed all that up. There's so many gold nuggets in there, but this is like 101 work that we should have learnt growing up that we never
Mm.
did. When we talk about communication, because it does affect every facet of life, if you don't have these skills, you are just not going to get that same level of success as someone who does have those skills. And so the more you can understand not just the people that you're relating to, but even your own style, the easier it is to not take things personally, to be able to navigate through those difficult, complex conversations that are going to present themselves, and they would certainly present themselves in your industry. I mean, I've worked with a number of companies now in the property industry, and so, because property is it's such a personal thing. So people are going to react, and they're not necessarily going to react in ways that are conducive to getting a good result. They might think they are. They might be going for the win-lose. Do you know what I mean? There's so many different scenarios, but the more you can understand the complexities of the different styles and then learn to navigate that into a safe, respectful conversation, the easier life is going to be just in general.
Yeah, for sure. So, Christy, in your experience, where do people generally get it wrong then when it comes to communicating with different types of clients, or I guess let's just say people? Where do people typically get it wrong?
I think people they don't catch the responses early enough. And so that's why this information is so important. The earlier that you can catch when things are starting to get off track and bring it back to a place of, when I say safety, I mean it needs to be you need to be able to recognize the signs. So the earlier you can recognize those signs, and this isn't necessarily inclusive conversations at the moment, this is just navigating difficult conversations. When people start withdrawing and going silent, or when people start becoming a little bit more controlling or demanding or opinionated or close questions, when those, I call that violent, which I don't really like that language, but more aggressive, when that begins to occur, you need to check. So something isn't safe for them. And it's usually one of three things. It's personal, so it matters. So it's bringing up emotion. It's important, or they might have a different opinion to you when the opinions are different. And so those are the kind of the three things that you need to look for, and then notice in yourself and others if you're withdrawing or if that's sort of more aggressive response, because there's a difference between aggressive and assertiveness.
Yeah.
Aggressiveness is when you are, it's like you're stating your rights, but it's almost like foot down, this is the way it is, and you're trampling over other people's rights in that process. Whereas when you're assertive, you're asserting your rights, but you're not trampling on anyone else's rights in the process. You're still maintaining that respectful communication, and therefore things stay safe, which means it stays psychologically safe. And if you can stay in that safe zone, you're able to keep people engaged in conversation, because the minute the conversation breaks down and stops, communication stops. So it's about sort of navigating that to keep people going in the conversation. So there's some of the things to look for. But when we talk about, did you have a question?
No, I'm just agreeing. Yeah, I've got so many like light bulb things going on right now, as I'm sure the listeners do too.
I love it. So then when we move into inclusive conversations, so you've kind of got the nuts and bolts of difficult conversations, which, is it important? Is it personal or emotional? And could we potentially have differing opinions? If that's yes, that means you're navigating into a difficult conversation territory. So you should be aware that that's the case. When you're going into any difficult conversations, it's looking for the signs of that withdrawal or the aggressiveness. And either of those, you need to be thinking to yourself, how can I get back to safety? So that's kind of the 101. With the inclusive conversations that we're talking about today, it's another layer on top of that, because we have so many different cultural styles. So some cultural styles are more verbal and verbose and out there and got the arms going, and others are a lot more indirect and quiet and won't ask questions. And so being aware of the different cultures can really make a difference, because for some cultures, you're going to need to probe a bit more to bring out the information that you need or to get them to respond. And others, you might need to kind of direct them down and calm down the state a bit more, because they might naturally be very direct or very, out there and verbose. Then there's the generations, and then there's the different personality styles as well. So there's many different layers to navigate. And I'd like to, as we go through, maybe spend a couple minutes on each.
Yeah, for sure. So really what I'm hearing, Christy, that if a organization or a person has like a one style fits all approach for communication, they're going to be missing the mark.
They are, yes.
Yeah. And so when we're in an industry where we are speaking to all different personalities, all different people, all different cultural backgrounds, we really need to hone in on this inclusive conversations here. So what is the best way that I suppose BDMs can recognize how they can put this into practice, or property managers that are listening?
A lot of it comes down to awareness. So even just watching this podcast today will create a lot more new awareness that they might not have thought of before. Being aware of the direct communicating countries versus the indirect communicating countries can help. So, for example, most Asian countries are quite indirect. Western countries tend to be more direct. Now, I'm really generalizing. There is a really good book called The Culture Map for those readers out there. It's by Erin Meyer. And the culture map breaks down. It's a really good study actually that breaks down the different cultures, because even if you, for those that really love this type of work and want to take it further, it's not just, for example, an Australian dealing with a Filipino, for example, could be one context, but then an English person dealing with a Filipino would be different.
Mm.
And the style changes based on the both countries, not just one.
Yeah, for sure. So awareness, I love that. And so, okay, the starts with awareness. And so how can people recognize, I suppose, early the best way to communicate differently to the person that they're speaking to then?
So how they can communicate early, ask me a bit more.
So how can a BDM recognize how they need to communicate to the person that they're speaking to early then?
Yes, yes. It's a good question, because the thing is, even though someone comes from a specific culture and that culture might be indirect, that particular individual might be a direct communicator. So it's not just putting people into a box and saying this, you're from this country. There are so many different influences that come into play, as I'm sure you can appreciate, where you were raised, your family environment. There's many different factors. Even your age is going to make a difference as well. So they need to just watch and they need to listen. So improving listening skills matters, because what happens is most people, when they're in a conversation, we all do it. But what we do is we're thinking about what we need to say next. And we're thinking about what we need to tick off and what we need to cover. And when we're doing that and we're in our own head, we're not actually listening. And so giving the conversation a little bit more space, which I know can be difficult when we're very busy, but sometimes pausing, slowing it down, asking, is there anything else? Open-ended questions really help. Those sorts of skills, mirroring back, paraphrasing back what you've heard, all those sorts of things can really help.
Yeah, I love it. And so many great tips already, Christy. So, I mean, I want to put you in the spotlight here. So what I suppose, with the different communication styles and the inclusive conversations, like what is some, I suppose, framework that our listeners can use, like from your wisdom and from your knowledge, so that they can really elevate, I guess, the way they are communicating, the way that then that conversation happens. And then I guess the, selling without selling, but actually leading someone to make a decision, because BDMs, and I think this is where there's so much misconception about this role. Like being a BDM is, there's so many different things, because BDMs want to win that deal, but they, most importantly, to win that deal, they need to win the human first. And so would you be able to break some of this down for the BDMs listening today?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that a really good place to start is to understand what builds trust in a relationship. So this is the Harvard business model that I'm going to share with you of building trust. There are 3 key pillars that build trust. The first one is authenticity. So what happens is we tend to have a mask, our work mask that we put on. And when we're not genuine, we sense it. Am I allowed to say we have a bullshit barometer?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
It's like we have this bullshit barometer, and like you sense when someone's not being genuine, and you sense when they're fake. And so that's the first pillar, authenticity. The second one is empathy. For someone to trust you, they have to believe that you actually care about them. And the third one is competency, which also goes closely in hand with reliability. So if someone believes you have the competence to do the job, they're much more likely to trust you. Now, I want to be really clear about competency, because you can be a leader in a large organization and not have all the skills or not have all the knowledge that you need in that team. You can rely on your team for that. So say, for example, someone goes into a new role, they're a new BDM, and they don't know everything yet. And I mean, I don't know if you ever know everything, but it's okay to say, I don't know. It's okay to say, look, I'm just finding my feet. I will get back to you, so you don't have to have all the skills. You need to understand what your skill gaps are and be working on building those skill gaps. Communication is a huge one. So building the competence, but also consistently showing up and being reliable. So if they're inconsistent, that doesn't build trust.
Mm.
And so that's a really, really good place to start. And that's a really good model. With the inclusive conversations, I don't have a model per se because it's literally just bits of content that I've pulled together myself around the countries and the cultures and different generational differences and then the e-disc stuff. But I'm happy to go through that with you in more detail.
Yeah, I love it. So a few things that, you mentioned, and off air we had spoken about this because we spoke about, okay, what are some fears and challenges that BDMs are facing right now? And one of the things I said is, well, that they have a mask on. They're not being authentic. They are, within a business, they might not be clear on who they are or what their why is. And so they want to do the role and they want to be really successful, but they haven't actually spent time to identify who they are. And I think, Christy, with then, when I met you and started doing this kind of work and the conversations that we had, and I'm sure you remember it, is I had to get really clear on all of those things to step into the next level or the next version of myself. So I really love that you mentioned that the first three pillars is authenticity with building trust. And I think that is trust with yourself before you build trust with others, I think is so important. The second one you said is empathy, and a key word that you said was believe. Making the client or the person actually believe that what you were saying is true, correct, makes them feel seen, heard, and understood. And again, going back to yourself, do you actually believe in the words that you're saying, or are you just making shit up, right, to try to win business? And then the third one is competency, right, which I think we look at, credibility and relatability in our industry. But for those that don't have wins on the board, you said identify the skill gaps. So like, if there's a gap there, what do you need to know? What are your clients going to need or want from you, to be able to confidently then, because another word that you said, speak about those things. So I really love that you broke that down to the pillars of trust. And so if BDMs, follow these three steps to build trust, they've got the awareness, they are being more present in their conversations and allowing that space for to listen and to understand what a client is saying, then they're actually just connecting with people in that moment, would you say, Christy?
Exactly. Yeah, they're connecting. And that's what builds connection. And also, vulnerability builds connection as well. So, it's okay to be you.
Mm.
You don't have to put on the fake the fake mask. It's that vulnerability. When you're a real person and you show up in a real way, I mean, obviously you're not bringing your issues and your challenges into the
Yeah.
conversation. There is a line there, but people really do respect and appreciate when you're being real, even if some of those conversations that are being delivered are quite difficult and may not suit the person that you're delivering them to. If people feel that you've got their best interest at heart or you're doing the best that you can do, then that does absolutely make a difference.
Yeah, for sure. I absolutely agree with that. So if BDMs, if they adapt their communication style and they're actually improving their trust and their conversations and not just connect their connection, then what changes them, Chrissy? Like what would they expect to change?
Well, they would expect that the responses that they're going to get back will be a lot more fluid and easier.
Mm.
There'll be less stress because when your communication gets through, like for example, I don't have a lot of argument. I don't have arguments. I don't deal with a lot of, I do have difficult people in my life. I mean, I work with grief and trauma and all sorts of really challenging things. But I can navigate those conversations because people know I care. And so it really does change. It changes the kind of the map that you're coming from. And hopefully, you know, the thing is that these skills are very nuanced. So we all have communication skills. We all communicate. But you can get better and better. Like, it's just levels. And the stronger you get in your communication and the better results you start getting, it does build your self-esteem and your confidence, which is very empowering. And the more empowered you feel and the more confident you show up, because you know you can handle whatever comes up. When you can't handle what comes up, what happens is people withdraw or they come out aggressive. They, you know, going back to the difficult conversations, when people don't feel safe within themselves, that's how it comes out.
Yeah. I have a question, Christy, because it's a bit relevant to what I'm seeing at the moment. So society's changing, right? And the way that I think some people, I'm not going to say all people, some people want to be communicated with is also changing, and we can blame different factors for that, right?
Yeah.
So something that I'm seeing at the moment from a lot of BDMs is they're actually getting leads or clients that are emailing them, and they're emailing them essentially just wanting fees. And so the challenge here that many BDMs have is they're not able to communicate value to these clients via an email, but they don't have somebody's phone number. They don't have this person's phone number. And so if we look at communication being such a pivotal skill, not just for a BDM, but then also for the landlord or for the tenants who are going to be on the other side of receiving that service, what is something that you could suggest for BDMs to help with this challenge they have right now? If that's the only communication style is via email, first of all, like, do they need to go back and identify, you know, the culture of that person, or do we know that, okay, they're more of a direct personality type, so they just want some basic ... but then we come at a standstill because it's then, well, we're just emailing the information. We don't have that face-to-face connection there. We can't help them move to the next step and help them see what matters and what's important to them other than just the fees. So can you help us with that, Christy?
Yeah, definitely. I think when it comes to emailing, it's not really possible to work out culture unless the name, but even the name, you know, if a lady's married, she can assume a name. So,
Yes.
you know, we don't know. Emailing, you know, that's just a way of people saving time. We are in a very busy society. And I get this as well. I get people that might message me, you know, what are your rates? Well, it just doesn't do the conversation justice. It's like, well, what are your biggest challenges? And you need to be able to come up with, I would probably have a generic response where you're building in the value adds into the email. So you're not just giving the rates, or you're asking a few open questions just so that I can make sure, you know, we have different levels of fees available. Is it okay if we just jump on a 5-minute call? Or the other thing is, you know, maybe just answer these couple quick questions. So, or jump on a 5-minute call. So you're allowing the control to stay with the person who's reaching out. Because the thing is the minute you make it too difficult, they'll just won't engage. So if you ask 100 questions, that's too hard. Someone else has given me a rate. I just want rates. So it's finding subtle little ways, and we can use AI to draft these things. I mean, you know, AI is fabulous at that. But it's kind of keeping them engaged, seeing if you can open up the conversation. If they really just want the rates, just at the end of the day, give them the rates. But the more you can glean out a little bit more information, and at the same time make sure that if the rates were in some sort of document that actually separated how they're providing the best value and their point of difference and that sort of thing, that would probably be useful as well, because then they have to look at that to look at the fees.
How do you feel about that though, Christy? Like, you know, for the work and the space that, you know, we're in, and I'm massive on communication, and I'm someone who would prefer to pick up the phone, just give me the information on the phone and go back and forth in emails. But if we're seeing this societal change, right, then it's not just a cultural, well, I guess it still is a cultural thing, but we're dealing with mass here, right? We're seeing things change. So then do we need to reevaluate? Because here's where I go. Even though it's not a preferred communication style for the individual, let's just say me or you're a BDM, but it is the preferred communication for someone. But we have values as individual people and for the business, and a lot of them values might be around communication. And we've got someone who actually doesn't want to communicate with the values that we have. What happens there then, Christy? Because we've got a value clash here with the business, the person, and the client.
Yeah, and I think that this fits in well with different generational styles because, for example, Gen Xers and baby boomers typically much prefer phone. Millennials just want it to be as fast as possible, so they'll get on the phone if they need to. But what we're finding is a lot of the younger generations, which are growing in population in the workforce and in the property market, they do prefer instant messaging and not even necessarily emails. So, they just want it done quickly. They'll jump on Zoom or FaceTime or something like that, maybe just making it as easy as possible. The thing is with the conflicting values, it depends on your position in that equation. So if you are the potential lead, it doesn't matter what the other people value to them, like really. And I guess that's the other thing as well, depending on how successful you are your BDMs in a position to choose who their customers are? I don't know. Would they be?
So, well, it depends. Like the thing is, where we say, a lot of us trainers say not all business is good business, meaning that unless we've had a conversation with the client or met them, how do we actually know who they are? Are they going to be respectful? Are they going to have unrealistic expectations? Are they rude? Do they have a demeanor that doesn't, fit with the type of clients I want to work with? So to answer your question, yes, they do have some legway then. And then it's about, the type of properties too that they bring on. We need to see the properties and make sure that they're quality properties that they're bringing on. So that there's so much to unpack in this initial, start of even developing a relationship, because we're just talking about the connection piece here and conversing with someone, and then the starting a relationship and then helping them on their journey is a whole nother step and a layer and a process. And so that's why I think I really wanted you to come on, because I think the way that we converse and have conversations with people in this day and age matters so much. Because although we can say, yes, society is changing, human behavior is changing, I think we need to have a look at ourselves individually in, are we actually contributing, though, to how we are changing as a society in the way that we're communicating? Like for me, because I give people an option. Sure, I can send you the details, but preferably I would love to jump on a Zoom, especially if I'm going to work with you. And so I think, again, you did say that option. It's like, okay, can you answer these questions? Or could it be, can you fill out a form? Could we jump on a 5-minute chat before I send you out this information? And I think underneath that, I think that if you received an email like that, you would feel pretty good, Christy, about that option, rather than just, oh, well, they just sent the info. Maybe I'm not that important to them, or maybe.
Well, relationship building really matters. I mean, that's what it's all about. Yeah. And I, as you were speaking then, I had a few thoughts that come in. One is the low hanging fruit. And when we talk about the Pareto principle, and for those that aren't familiar with the Pareto principle, 20% of what we do brings in 80% of our rewards. So 20% of our effort, our time, our energy brings in 80% of our revenue, our awards, the reward. Whereas 80% of what we do, I call it the white noise, we get stuck in the white noise, only brings in 20%. And so if we can sometimes we might need to let go of that low hanging fruit, the bottom 10%, for example, because the time and the energy that you spend for the reward, if you invest at that time up into your top 20 clients, your top 20%, you're actually going to get a lot more revenue, success. It's going to be easier on you as well, energetically. And so being aware of where your time is going can really make a difference too.
Yeah, so spot on. And I think it's going back Even this morning, I was on training with my coach, and he said, be aware of the things that you actually don't like to do and the things that you love to do. And it's so relevant, because if you do more of the things that you love to do, of course you're going to get better outcomes and better results, and get that success, or feel that success, right? Christy, I want to get personal here. I know that this might be a little legway, but I just feel, and I'm called into it because I'm so present with our conversation right now. When I started working with you, there was one particular area that I wanted to work with, and that was my responsiveness, if you recall, was the way that I responded, and specifically into my close relationships, not so much my external relationships, into my core. And you helped me work through that in so many magnificent ways. And I remember, I think that by doing that work, it really changed the way that I connected with myself, how I created that space for myself, the way that I could train my brain in a moment to be aware of, am I going to react? Am I going to respond? Am I in fight flight mode? And so I think I wanted to bring that up because I think it's so relevant to this conversation today. When we're going to be in moments ourselves individually, and I know that BDMs are going to face the same thing, that we are triggered. Where someone says something that questions our reality, or what we think is important, or what matters, or our opinions are different. And there is so much work to do in this space, and it's not just a simple thing, but I truly believe that when we can be aware of that trigger and ask those questions and see someone's lenses from their reality and what has shaped their opinion on that thing, the depthness of conversations just go to a whole nother level. So first of all, I want to say thank you for that. But second of all, I think it's just really relative because of the conversations that BDMs are having every single day. So could you provide some quick suggestions to BDMs listening, where they are listening to right now and going, yeah, meeting someone and I felt that resistance, or I wanted to be like, no, the market's not saying that, or no, you're not going to get that price. Like, what are some things that they could do, tangible ways that in that present moment that just gets them to stop and go, I'm not going to react to that?
Yeah, I love it. And thank you for saying that. And I appreciate you sharing, because, it really matters, this work. And the more we can understand ourselves and the more we can work on our responsiveness versus, cause versus effect, like we don't want to be reactive, the easier things get. I think the first thing to unpack there is that triggering. When we talk about triggers, they're almost like a torchlight. So that's on your pain. So it's showing you there's pain there. The challenging thing about triggers is there's a part in our brain called the amygdala. It's like a smoke detector. It's like warning, warning, warning that goes off. And the fact is we are wired to resist change. And so this primal part of our brain, reptilian part of our brain that goes off like a smoke detector, in the caveman days, danger meant survival. However, today in our country where we live, it's not life and death. However, the brain still acts like we just go into this trauma response. So that's one thing, is being aware that you're being triggered. When you are triggered, that is your old pain, and it's your unhealed wounds that are coming to the surface. So things that have happened in the past, because we're not taught how to feel. This is something that I'm very, very passionate about. So I love we've touched on this. We're not taught how to feel. We're taught how not to feel. We're taught how to suppress and avoid and get on with it, and busy and get the work done and smile and show up. But inside there can be chaos, which can show up as resistance. It can show up as confusion. It can show up as unhappiness. It can show up as overwhelm, fatigue, burnout, panic attacks, anxiety, depression, like anger outbursts. Like, it can show up in so many different ways. The more we can learn that it's safe to feel and to learn how to process the emotional pain through our body, the more balanced we become. And so learning that your triggers, they're like, although they're showing you where the pain is, they're also the map out. Like they're actually showing you the pathway out, because wherever there's pain, there's something to work on. So it's almost like, oh, I need to do some work on that. And the more you can work on those triggers and that pain, again, the more balanced you'll feel, the more you can have conversations like this about how you respond, how you react. How could you react differently? What is it about that? What's that triggering in you? So really unpacking it, and it takes work to do that. This is conscious work to show up and do that. But just some basic strategies. Breathing matters. So when we're in this kind of triggered response, our breathing is going to be shallow, 100%. So stopping for a breath, and a deep breath actually can give you time for pause. Pausing the conversation as well. We don't have to have all the answers right now. So it is okay to say, can I come back to you? Make a time and then come back. You know, if you're being triggered, to continue when you're in a triggered response, when you're in fight, flight, freeze mode, it's not useful. So it's see how you can remove yourself from that situation and come back to it. So you've got time for the amygdala to switch off. It takes about 2 seconds for the pause to reach our frontal lobe, and that's where we actually think. And so when we react straight away to the smoke detector, we just react, but you can't undo the damage that's done in that moment. And so the more you can just give it, even just 2 seconds, 1001, 1002, it gives the rational brain time to actually kick in and start working so that you're not hijacked by that. Other things as well is, you know, the escalation of conflict is, you know, the minute people, when personal space gets more shallow, when people start staring more, when the arms go above the shoulders, you know, there are signals that you can catch this in other people as well. That's when, and when the conversation starts losing content, when you stop talking about the thing and you start getting personal or talking, that's when it's time to recognize that and bring it back into content. Because there's a technique, I mean, I've done many years in human resources that I use called the broken record technique. So when you're working with someone that's just not being rational, for example, or if you've got to deliver bad news to someone or something really complex, they're only going to hear you for the first 15, 20 seconds, and then they go into hijack mode. And so just repeating what's the key message here. It's a bit like being a politician. You know how you ask them a question and they just answer it with their agenda?
Yeah.
Yeah. A bit like that. So, you know, what is the key message? And just keep coming back to the key message. Don't go down all the rabbit warren that their amygdala hijack's taking you down.
Yeah. So valuable. Yeah, how we just flip that too. I think that is really valuable. Okay, Christy, let's tie this in because we had so much today to unpack, and it was brilliant. But we started off with you know, talking about when something isn't safe for the person that we're speaking to, and so we need to recognize, you know, why it matters, why it's important, and you know, being aware of the opinion difference and how to help them get back to safety. We differentiated between like an aggressive versus a assertive approach, which I think was fantastic. You spoke about the culture map book, which was a great recommendation, and how it all starts with the awareness of the person, aka the BDM in this case, and really create that space when you're speaking to someone, slow it down, make sure you're listening to them. We went through the trust and how to build that. So authenticity, empathy, and your, what's the last one?
Confidence.
Competency. Yeah. And look at if there's any skill gaps there and, work on those things. We then went into we spoke about if we're having a conversation with someone and we are noticing that trigger, or perhaps they are triggered, how we can move through that and create, again, I think that space to move through that, or suggest perhaps another time, or come back to that, or can I, come back to you. I think that was great. I love that we had some science in there about being aware of the oh my God, I can't speak right now. Amygdala and our brain. So remember BDM's 2 seconds, right? So if you can have a breath or take a drink of water or something, 2 seconds, so that you're actually just creating that space for you to just think about what's happening in your reality right now. But I think I wanted to lean on this, right? So if BDMs or property managers are really wanting to stand out in their marketplace and be authentic and trust themselves and have their clients trust them, how does mastering that inclusive conversations give them an edge?
So what will happen is in their conversations are going to be a lot richer. They're going to get a much better response from their clients. You'd have to assume that would end up with better reviews.
Yes, yeah.
Sure. And referrals as well, because when you build the trust and you have those conversations and you care about people, your name gets around. People notice that stuff. And likewise, if you're not doing that, what happens? People speak when they're not happy.
Yeah.
But I imagine that a lot of the conversations, because, property is a very personal conversation, irrespective of whether it's someone's personal property or investment property, because it's their livelihood. It's a massive investment. And so dealing with those conversations in a way that is respectful, that is assertive, that is knowledgeable, that is taking into account the different cultural cues that come through, different age preferences and the way that they communicate, and even different, behavioural styles, you're going to get better results. And it's like do a little bit here and a little bit there. It's not about learning all this at once. It's how can I just be a little bit better? The next time something comes up and you're like, what's going on here? Because if you don't understand what's going on, it means you don't have all the information. So it's like, what am I missing here?
Yeah.
Is cultural differences at play? Is this an age thing? Is this just a different behavioural style? So when I say behavioural styles, we have dominant styles, we have people who need lots and lots of detail. So if they're dealing with someone who needs a lot of detail, whether they're detailed or not, they need to give detail. It's like you have to meet the client where they are, and we need to, in a way, become a little bit of a chameleon to adapt to the different styles. If you can adapt to those different styles of communicating, you're much more likely to get clients.
Yeah.
And you're much more likely to have satisfied clients.
So well said. So well said. And so there's one shift you'd love every BDM listening to make after this conversation that we've had today. What would it be, Christy?
I think the biggest shift is to really begin to notice when communication is starting to break down, like earlier. Yeah. So that kind of violence, silence, passive aggressive, the minute someone starts withdrawing, and you know what, this is definitely relative in our personal lives as well. If you can begin to notice that in yourself and in others straight away, and just think to yourself, how can I make this safe again? Because that's kind of the crux of the whole conversation. Yeah. And meeting them where they are as well. So that's something I work very closely at. It doesn't matter what I believe in many ways, because I've got to meet the client where they are.
Thank you, Christy, for joining us today. For anyone listening, Christy's details are down below. If you would like to engage or have a conversation with Christy, find out things that she's got going on, please make sure you connect with her, follow her, get on her email list. She's always doing some amazing things. Thank you so much for the value that you have provided to our property management profession today. Again, it's been an honor to have you, and you was just so much insights to help our BDMs like level up their conversations and really lead in this space. I think it was really powerful. So thank you so much.
Yeah, you're most welcome. And I trust that's a valuable conversation for everyone. Like I said, not just personally, not just professionally, but personally as well, because, the more we can nail this stuff, the easier life becomes.
Yes, and everyone wants an easy life, peaceful life.
Exactly. Thanks so much for having me on.
Thank you, Christy. And as always, to our listeners, keep rising.